Electronic products that are obsolete often are described as electronic waste. Electronics that are disposed of are known to be harmful due to the toxicants exposed from the electronics such as mercury and lead. The United States is the second largest electronic waste producer in the world after China, estimating about 6.9 million tons of electronic waste in 2016. Electronic wastes are exported from the US to Asian countries such as China and countries in Africa. In January 2018, a sweeping ban was imposed by China as an initiative to deny foreign garbage from the Chinese land. Thus, it has prevented the US from exporting its waste product to China. The US has yet to enact federal laws concerning electronic waste nor laws to ban the export of electronic waste to developing countries. However, it is not accurate to say that the US is not concerned about electronic waste. In 1976, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act (RCRA) was enacted as a principal federal law which acts as the policy to govern, control, and manage solid hazardous waste disposal. In conjunction with this, there are only a number of states in the US such as California and Colorado which have legislations on electronic waste. The Basel Convention and the Control of Transboundary Waste and their Disposal 1992 is a treaty which restricts the export of electronic waste and has been ratified by a total of 182 parties. However, the US is one of the parties that has yet to ratify the treaty.
In 2016, the United States is the second largest e-waste producer in the world with approximately 6.9 tons of e-waste. It shows that the rapid growth of technology resulted in the large amount of waste. The presence of hazardous materials in the electronic goods could pose risks to human health and to environment. There are few successful laws implemented by states, specifically Colorado and California, but some laws are yet to be enacted by the federal law. Therefore, this case study is to explore to what extent the implementation of environmental law in Colorado and California influences the political will of the US government. There are three objectives in this case study. Number one, to identify the effectiveness of the implementation of environmental law in Colorado and California. Number two, to identify the effectiveness in regulating environmental law in controlling e-waste which influences the federal law. And number three is the political will of the US government to come up with policy to support the environmental law. In the context of the international relations, realism is the most appropriate paradigm as the application of e-waste. In this concept, the United States is the main actor. This approach gives more focus on how the United States plays an important role in overcoming e-waste issues by making new policies in order to protect the environment and human health. In addition, environmental issues like e-waste are not directly affecting human beings overnight, however, will gradually affect in the long term. A polluted environment is not appropriate for one to work. Therefore, the United States enacted the Resources Conservation and Recovery Act (RCRA) in order to minimize the waste disposal and hence to control the level of contamination.
No US federal law that need to recycling of electronic waste or prohibit it from being exported to a developing country. An existing law, the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, does cover some toxic electronic waste, but consistent with the Electronic Take Back Coalition, virtually all electronic components that are being exported for recycling are exempted. So in 2003, California was the first state to pass e-recycling law. California enacted the Electronic Waste Recycling Act of 2003 to determine a funding system for gathering and recycling for certain electronic waste. The Act contained the enforcement provision that provide for the imposition of monetary penalties against both retailers and manufacturers in the event of non-compliance. In the Colorado Senate, the Senate signs into law of electronic recycling job in November 2012. This act designed to encourage business and residential customers to recycling their old or used electronic equipment on the 1st July 2013. The law banned the disposal of waste electronic devices at solid waste landfill and requires sites receiving a e-waste not already subject to recycling facility regulation to manage used electronic devices in a manner that prevent the release of waste or waste constituents into the environment.
The mismanagement of e-waste disposals have been issued throughout the years, and it is still a growing concern. There has been collective efforts to douse down and better manage this issue. On the international level, there was Basel Convention that went into force in 1992. It had received signatures from 53 countries, of which there were 2 that signed without ratifying it. Those 2 are the United States and Haiti. This convention has indeed had its positive impact to the world throughout the years. Some are still slow to this, but eventually the world catches up to those who have not. They still had enforced this public law RCRA that functions as a guideline in handling this issue. However, it only covers some toxic wastes, and not to mention that it has grown to become a contentious program. California and Colorado have both passed and signed the Electronic Waste Recycling Act. California is the leading state successfully battling mismanagement of e-waste disposal. Colorado, however, is not doing too well, for the people are not putting more efforts, despite having awareness regarding the matter. To some extent, admittedly, these efforts have been positively impacting. Awareness is increasing throughout nations, and more efforts are put into the actions. Globally, we saw China step up with their national sword policy. As for the US, more leaders have started to correspond more to this issue.
The biggest problem with this convention is there is no clear mechanism that defines what constitutes hazardous waste. Hazardous waste characterization was never done to securely characterize the waste. And if the convention were to, in essence, strengthen its credibility, the content of the convention which described the hazardous waste should be defined in an understandable manner. Secondly, the convention should properly characterize the means of hazardous waste disposal instead of only stating that the waste should only be handled in an environmentally sound manner. To criticize this, the importing or exporting country may have different interpretation of this convention, and it is impossible to align all the parties in the convention with the same management. Similar to the case which involves Total Reclaim, one of the largest hazardous waste management companies in the United States. It claims to dispose waste in an environmentally sound manner. However, the Basel Action Network team exposed in May 2016 that the company uses backdoors to export electronic waste to Hong Kong. In short, the company was only charged with false advertising and fraud due to the claims of being fully environmentally conscious with their hazardous waste disposal. Total Reclaim was never charged for dumping or exporting waste to regions in Asia and potentially endangering human and the environment. This proves there is lack of statutory authority to implement the law, and there is no law regarding hazardous waste itself in the United States. Thus, is it a need for the United States to ratify the Basel Convention? The question remains, what is the ideal solution for the issue? Firstly, the United States should enact laws that revolves around electronic waste which constitutes hazardous waste and controls the emission of hazardous waste. This is a way to restrict companies and individuals from producing a massive amount of hazardous electronic waste. Say that the individual or companies do not comply with the law, legal action should be taken affirmatively together with a fine. In addition, the law should also be equipped with the requirement where not every company should be allowed to operate in this field, considering that it involves hazardous waste substances. Thus, it will be possible to segregate companies which are not reliable to run this operation. Secondly, statutory authority should be tasked to monitor the volume of produce for electronics. The volume of produce of electronics in industries should be limited up to a point where it is only manufactured in a moderate amount. When the supply of electronics is cut down, the consumption of electronics will decrease, and this will lead to the decrease in the production of electronic waste. However, this can only happen if the statutory authority monitors all the industries in the United States.
As a conclusion, the convention, the laws, the acts all have flaws and downsides that require more patching up. The US has had its own laws and acts, but the authority is still problematic as they still leak out their e-waste disposals. They need to enforce their acts more properly and start taking more responsibilities and more care towards their own wastes. A statutory authority can be set up in order to monitor the proper regulations. The current efforts are already showing some extent of effectiveness, but with more regulation of the enforcement, it will fruit to a successful management of e-waste.